And welcome back to the Flow Sports Fix on this Wednesday. Ricky Lambert's filling in for Wayne the Flowman this week. The Flowman getting set for, well, it's going to be a big football and netball season, and he's getting himself primed ready for the Flow Sports Show when it comes in on Friday afternoon. But Ricky, he's filling in, and he's doing a pretty good job. We should point out he's doing a pretty good job. And right now he's going to tell us about a game in the Riverland.
It does set an exciting precedent when you've got national sporting teams running trial games or even league matches for premiership points in the regions. And I certainly remember when the World Cup was hosted in Australia and we had the West Indies and Sri Lanka come out and play at the Berri Oval. In the tournament itself, I had Desi Haynes there out in the outfield. My mates and I were pinching ourselves to see one of the great stars of West Indian cricket so close to us on our own home oval. And the good news is that we also are seeing a fixture scheduled now. It's a pre-season fixture in the National Netball competition. The Adelaide Thunderbirds will host the West Coast Fever in a pre-season clash in Berri. And there are these types of events that are occurring across regional South Australia. We've got the Country Football Championships happening down at Victor Harbour, which will coincide with a game for premiership points hosted by South Adelaide Panthers. So it is something I've been pointing out across the show today. It would be great if our national sporting leagues would schedule fixtures, be they pre-season or premiership point matches in the regions. It does happen. For instance, the AFL is going to have a game like that later in the season, but I think at Ballarat, but it only happens rarely. I think there's a case for it happening more often. The background that I think is worth noting when it comes to Berri is that this match will happen at a stadium that has been in the works for decades to try and build an indoor stadium in the town of Berri, even though other towns had been able to get stadiums in previous years. So Suncorp Super Netball will come to the Riverland on April the 16th, 2021. They had actually locked in this fixture previously in 2020, but they had not been able to go ahead with it because of the COVID-19 pandemic. So the athletes from both clubs will be hosting junior clinics at Berri Netball Club the day after their match on the Saturday, but it is a great coup for the Riverland community to get a Super Netball pre-season match scheduled in their town. And the Riverland, like many of our regional areas, has been a source of some great netball players in the past. And one of those players is former Thunderbird Emily Beaton, who's returning to her hometown of Loxton to play for the Loxton Netball Club in the local 2021 season. And you just got to wonder and hope that this sort of fixture scheduling might inspire a local player to go to the highest level in that sport. The encouraging thing, I think, for sporting clubs and for leagues in the regions is that there is not only precedent but also thinking within the league scheduling and the club scheduling that they are interested in scheduling these games in regional areas. So why not make an inquiry and give it a go? You might be hosting a national team in your town next season.
And it's something we've talked about here on the Flow Sports Fix and on the Sports Show as well with the Flowman and the Statman, and we'd love to see more of it too. Getting out to these regional areas, that's what the teams and that's what the leagues need to do, to get out there and reach out to the grassroots community, the communities that really love them, and then eventually do supply them with players. There was some games played over Easter, some football and netball games. Ricky's going to tell us the results right now.
Yesterday I brought you a heap of results from the Easter footy and netball fixtures that occurred across the Easter long weekend, becoming something of a tradition across many of our country football and netball regions in Victoria and New South Wales. One result I didn't bring you because I wanted to delve into it a lot deeper today is the big match between Corowa Rutherglen Kangaroos and the Wodonga Bulldogs. It was a big match in the sense that it was scheduled to occur on Easter Saturday as one of two games in that league that occurred over the Easter weekend, but it was between two sides that were the bottom two sides in the last full season of competition in 2019, with only 3 wins between them across the 18-game season. So both sides, you could see there was some energy on the sidelines and on the benches when it looked like they might be getting a win here, feeling like maybe after the pandemic they could put 2019 behind them and have a much better 2021. And it was warm there at the Oval, and I think that was one of the reasons why one of the teams ran out of legs towards the end of the match. It was a game that was played to a high quality and high tempo, a lot of end-to-end football football and plenty of goals scored, and it is a high-quality league. You've got the likes of Jeff Garlett running around for the Albury Tigers not long after he called time on his AFL career, but beautiful conditions that the match was played in. And in the first quarter, the Corowa Rutherglen were ahead 4-2 to 3-1, though I think Wodonga kicked the first couple of goals and signalled their intentions early. There was a significant period of the first half where the Bulldogs were breaking down the Corowa Rutherglen attacks across their half-back line, but then the Kangaroos were being brought undone by some really good defending from the fullbacks in the Wodonga colours. By halftime, the scoreline was 8-3 to 7-5 in the Kangaroos' home side's favour, but early in the third quarter, the Bulldogs pulled ahead. The visitors, particularly through Reece Ritchie, sold some candy and kicked a brilliant goal from half forward. They were looking a lot sharper at that point in the match, but come three-quarter time, Corowa Rutherglen were still ahead 12-6 to 11-6. The final quarter, quite clearly, Corowa Rutherglen had the greater legs, and they kicked away 5-2 in that quarter to 3-1, running out winners 17-8, 110 to Wodonga Bulldogs 14-7, 91. And the warm conditions, you could tell in the match conditioning between the two sides. I mean, naturally, the side that's won is going to stay up on their feet, but there were some Wodonga players really doubled over and knackered after that match, and I think that shows why the Roos were able to run out that match successfully. Just quickly, the other match that happened over the Easter weekend on that same Saturday between the sides that had a much happier season the last time they all had a full season in 2019. Wangaratta Rovers hosted the Albury Tigers, and this was a close match, really close in fact. Across the quarter time and half time scores, only about 2 goals in it. Well, Albury kicked away 9-13 to 7-2 in the third quarter, but then they kind of froze up. They only kicked 1 goal, 1 in the final quarter, to Wangaratta Rovers kicking 3 goals, 7, desperately trying to get over the line, but the Tigers hung on to win by 5 points, 74 to 69, and as I mentioned earlier, Jeff Garlett playing in that league, he kicked 2 goals for the Tigers.
And from football and netball, but Ricky also had some thoughts on the Stawell Gift.
And it is wonderful to be able to celebrate that the Stawell Gift was able to get up and running this year. As has been tradition, it's run over the Easter period. It was traditionally the Easter Gift on the back of the gold rush. That's how long it's been going for, since 1878. Only previously took a break for the war years, and so last year, when the pandemic stopped it running, was a very rare occurrence indeed. This was the 139th Stawell Gift. And before handing out the ribbons for the winners in the races, just looking at the history of the gift in recent times since February 2019, the race that has been hailed as the richest foot race in the country had its prize money slashed from $40,000 to $15,000. But that was because they were struggling to find a sponsor, and then the Victorian Government, Northern Grampians Shire Council and the Stawell Athletic Club had come to an agreement, but then that agreement fell over because of conditions imposed by the Victorian Government. But then in November of 2020, a new sponsorship deal was sealed to keep the race televised and receive $1.22 million from the Victorian Government over 4 years. As I said earlier in the program, talking about country sport and country sporting events, I think that state, federal and local governments and even peak athletic and sporting bodies need to look at investing in these types of community events, not only to support community physical and mental well-being, but to back events that may well go on to be bigger and stronger as regional population grows. The success and return of the event owes a lot to the return of a sponsor, in this case Power Core Australia, who are naming rights sponsors for 5 years starting this year. The race is run over traditionally 130 yards, but that was converted in the metric system to the closest approximate 120 metres in the 1970s. Reports indicate that 5,000 people, a capacity crowd, attended the race, which is said to contribute $5 million a year to the local economy. The women's race was won by South Australia's Hayley Orman, while the men's race was won by Victorian sprinter Edward Ware. Hayley Orman told the gathered media that she'd had a really tough build-up to the race, overcoming injuries, whilst Ware, running in his third final, said it had been really hard doing training during the lockdown, but he had been religiously doing his training sessions to get ready for the race. The races sit roughly at the end of the Victorian athletics calendar and so serve as something of a grand final event for athletic sprinters. and is, of course, a carnival that runs across the Easter weekend. So congratulations to all the stakeholders, from the sponsors to the levels of government, the athletics club and the organisers and the local community, for digging in there and getting the event back up and running bigger and better than ever.